All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we're actually very honored to have with us as a guest Professor Petteri Taalas, the Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization. And he is here to present the WMO's Greenhouse Gas report. And so we will start with Professor Taalas. Following this briefing, you'll have the briefing from the spokesperson, Stefan Dushrik, right after that. But first, Professor Taalas, please, the floor is yours.
So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this event on behalf of WMO, and greetings from Geneva, where we are placed in, but we have had a tendency to release some of these climate reports also here in New York, and we are having the Chief Executive Board of UN here, and that's why I'm here, and we have been just talking about water for the past 2 days, and we are preparing the UN Water Conference. But when it comes to greenhouse gases, we have a tendency that we publish status of greenhouse gas concentrations report before the COP meetings, and we are just heading towards COP27 that Egypt will host in Sharm el Sheikh in a week's time, and this report is supposed to be some sort of basis for the negotiators and motivator for the negotiators. And here we are talking about things that are happening in real atmosphere. We have a network of 150 stations worldwide where we measure concentrations of main greenhouse gases. It's carbon dioxide, it's methane and nitrous oxide, which are the three most important gases. And besides that, we have also satellite measurements provided by USA, China, and Japan so far. And in all of those three gases, we have again broken new records. So we haven't seen any improvement in real atmosphere so far. And for example, during the past couple of years, we have seen lockdowns in many countries, and where the emissions have been dropping of carbon dioxide, but because of the very long lifetime, we haven't seen any improvement in the real atmosphere. So the carbon dioxide concentrations keep on growing, and we were publishing a couple of months ago a report where we showed that we have already exceeded the emissions of 2019 during the early part of this year. So we haven't seen any continuous improvement in that sense. And carbon dioxide is the most important greenhouse gas. It's responsible for 2/3 of the warming, and its lifetime is very long. It takes up to thousands of years to remove carbon from the atmosphere through natural processes. So that's the most biggest challenge, and most of those emissions are coming from consumption of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. And the second most important greenhouse gas is methane, which is responsible for about 18% of the warming, and we have seen a record in the growth of methane concentration last year. We have started this kind of reporting in 1983, and the annual growth was breaking record last year, and this is of course bad news. We know that this increase is very much coming from tropical areas where we have both wetlands and then we have also human activities there, coming from waste and also from rice paddies and cattle. So that's a bad news. And also in the third greenhouse gas, nitrous oxide, which is responsible for 8% of the warming, we have seen again record. And I may show you some slides to prove that what I just said is also reality. So I will show you some related slides. So this is graph is showing the report which is available on our website as well. Okay, let me see how it goes here. And so these are the new concentrations of greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. And since the 1750s, we have seen about 150% increase of carbon dioxide concentration, 260% increase of methane concentration, and 124% increase of nitrous oxide concentration. And as I said, this 18 ppb growth of methane, that's a new record since '83 when we started this monitoring. And here you can see the relative importance of the gases. 2/3 is coming from carbon dioxide, 16% from methane, and 7% from nitrous oxide. And in this graph, you can see that the relative importance of carbon dioxide has been growing, and that's related to the fact that we have started using more and more fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. And the growth has been especially strong in East Asian countries, whereas the developed world, European countries, USA, Japan, and Singapore, for example, they have been able to reduce their emissions during the past 15 years. And just one back. Here you can see the growth of those concentrations, and this carbon dioxide graph is just showing steady growth year by year. And in methane we have seen variations, especially when Soviet Union collapsed in the 90s. There was some sort of phase out of the emission growth when they started taking care of their gas pipelines in a better fashion. But as I said, during the past year we have seen this fairly strong increase, which is record since '83. And nitrous oxide, it's also steady growth, and those emissions are very much coming from farmlands. And this is the network that we are dealing with. We have measurements about 150 stations worldwide, and then we have also aircraft and vessel measurements from the Pacific Ocean, where we don't have so many in situ stations, and we are taking care of the quality of the data, and you can trust these measurements. And this is these blue bars here. They are demonstrating this annual growth of methane, and 21 was a record in that respect. And finally, I would like to show that we have also information on what has been happening during the past millions of years, and that's of course based on indirect means of estimation. And we know that when the carbon dioxide concentration was last time the same as today, then the temperatures were about 2 to 4 degrees higher than today, and the sea level was 10 to 30 meters higher than today, and that was related to the melting of Antarctic and Greenland glaciers. And you can see also this ice core record, which is for the past hundreds of thousands of years, which is this black curve here, and we have far exceeded that concentration already. So we are beyond the normal variation. So that's all from my side, and I'm open for your questions as the chair permits.
The floor for questions. Please identify yourselves to our speakers once you're called upon. Edie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taalas, on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association. Thank you for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. With the three main greenhouse gases hitting record high levels in the atmosphere last year, your agency has called this ominous and bad news for the planet. What would it take to reverse this, and is it realistic in the current political, environmental climate in the world today?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There are also positive news. As I said, 32 countries have reduced their emissions during the past 15 years, and at the same time their economies have been growing. And that's very much European countries, but also Japan, USA, and Singapore, for example, belongs to such group of countries. And the big challenge is now in for example Asian countries where the emissions have been still growing. That's very much China, India, Vietnam, Indonesia type of countries. And at the last COP meeting in Glasgow, the developed countries, the G7 countries and European Union made commitments to keep us on this 1.5 degree warming track. But unfortunately, some other countries were not able to do so. But we got also new commitments from countries that didn't do so earlier. So, for example, China is now aiming at becoming carbon neutral by 2060, India by 2070, Russia by 2050 as well, and many Arabic countries by 2050. So we heard lots of new commitments, and we have started moving in the right direction, but the speed is not high enough to stay within this Paris 1.5 to 2 degrees limits. We are now heading towards 2.5 to 3 degrees warming, and the good news is that we are no more heading towards 3 to 5 degrees warming, which was the message from 2014 IPCC report. So positive things have been happening. And also the good news is that we have also better technological means to be successful in climate mitigation. For example, the prices of solar and wind energy, they have been dropping under the prices of fossil-fueled energy production. And also the prices of batteries and electric vehicles, they have been dropping, and many car manufacturers have decided that they will stop production of fossil-based engines during the coming years. So also positive things are happening, but we are not yet heading towards the Paris 1.5 to 2 degrees target.
And just one quick follow-up. You said that the speed it's not happening fast enough. How fast would it need to happen to keep to 1.5 degrees?
So what happens during the coming 10 years, that's also critical, and unfortunately some of these big emitters, they were not able to make such commitments, and we have estimated that there would need to be seven times more ambitious in our mitigation action to stay within this 1.5, which is at the moment very difficult to achieve, I would say.
James Bayes from Al Jazeera. COP26 last year in Scotland, most experts believe was somewhat disappointing, the outcome from COP26. So I'd like you to take your scientific hat off for a moment and put your political hat on. What is your message to leaders at COP27 and also to the G20, which will be meeting concurrently with COP27? What do they need to do?
Yeah, so in the UN, we regard Glasgow COP, this COP26, as second most successful COP. Of course, the best one was 2015 Paris COP, when we were able to reach a consensus to sign the Paris Agreement, which has been now ratified by all all of the countries. In Glasgow, the G7 countries and European Union made commitments, and we heard commitments from several countries which didn't do so before. And the big challenge lies within these G20 countries. It's important to get the whole G20 family on board because that group is responsible for 80% of the global emissions. And these G7 and European countries, they are only responsible for one third of the emissions. So it's not enough that they are very ambitious, but the rest of the G20 should have such ambition level. At the COP27, which starts about a week from now, we will also pay attention to climate adaptation, and that's going to be one of the tones there, and there will be also Africa flavor, and one of the new things which is supposed to be decided there is investments in early warning services, which is very powerful way to adapt to climate change. And at the moment, only half of 193 members of WMO have proper early warning services in place. So that's going to be one issue there. And there's going to be also more attention to the water resource management, and it's also very much linked to the early warning service issues. And then we will also discuss whether there would be more ambitious pledges coming from the countries, and especially expectation related to G20 is high.
Thank you, Farhan. Thank you, Professor Taalas. It's Pamela Falk from CBS News. Your agency has often predicted the worst-case scenario, the meteorological effects of not getting to these goals. So would you tell us in the short term, since there's some positive news, but the world hasn't gotten to 1.5 degrees Celsius yet, what do you see in terms of weather impacts in the next year or 2 years? Stronger storms, fires, things like that you have looked at in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's certain inertia in the climate system, and we have already emitted so much, especially carbon dioxide, to the atmosphere that this negative trend in climate will continue for the coming decades. If we are successful with climate mitigation, we could phase out this negative trend in 2060s, and hopefully we would be able to reach this Paris limits 1.5 to 2 degrees. And the higher the warming rate is, the more negative impacts we will see. And we could phase out this negative trend in weather patterns. That means flooding, drought, heat waves, tropical storms. But the game that we have already lost is the melting of glaciers. We have so high concentration of carbon dioxide that the melting of glaciers will continue for the coming hundreds of years, even coming thousands of years, and that will contribute to the sea level rise accordingly. So the sea level rise and a glacier melting game we have already lost, unless we create means to remove carbon from the atmosphere. And so far we don't have a good technological means for that. So there are both good news that this negative trend in weather patterns could be seized, but the glacier game and sea level rise game we have already lost.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You talked about some positive steps by countries, different conferences about environment and pledges. Yet the countries with the most pro-environment and most alarmist messages about climate, like in Europe, European countries and United States and others, right now practically their leaders, directly or indirectly, pushing oil-producing countries to produce more oil, to drill more. Basically their message is drill, drill, drill. What do you think about all this?
That's a good question, and of course the actual challenge is how to get enough energy to keep the houses warm during the coming winter or coming winters, and that has meant that there's more demand for fossil energy to comfort the gap that we are facing because of the Russian action, but my own belief is that in the 5 to 10 years time frame we will see positive development. It's going to speed up a reduction of the consumption of fossil fuels, because we have seen that fossil fuels can be used even as a weapon or blackmailing mean, and that's what's happening with Russia today, and this is demonstrating that this kind of energy carries certain uncertainty, and therefore I'm confident that at least these wealthy countries will speed up their greening of their economies and greening of their means of transportation and greening of their means of producing energy. So in the 5 to 10 years range we may see positive evolution when it comes to climate mitigation.
Linda Fasulo, NPR at the UN. You had mentioned methane emissions, I believe, and I'm not sure if you said 16% of emissions are due to methane. Has that number come down significantly? What had it been?
So methane is also a greenhouse gas, and it's responsible for 16% of the warming, and the rate of the relative importance of gases has changed. So we have been using so much fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas during recent years that the relative importance of methane has been dropping, and the relative importance of carbon dioxide has been increasing.
And what are the sources of methane, the most significant sources? I mean, how significant is agriculture?
So a fraction of the methane is coming from tropical wetlands, and for example, this deforestation of rainforest is having an impact, and that's still very much happening in Amazonia region, countries like Brazil, in central part of Africa, and some parts of southern Asia. That's contributing, and then we have cattle. The cows are emitting also methane, and also these rice paddies. You grow the rice in wetlands, and that's also one of the sources of methane. So we have both natural sources, and then we have these agriculture related sources. And then one matter of concern is what's going to happen in the Arctic in the long run. With the warming, but so far we haven't seen a boosting of the Arctic methane emissions. That's one thing that we have to follow, but so far that hasn't been the major player here.
Thank you. I'm Sylviane Zehir from L'Orient Le Jour. My questions for the Arab world. It's an existential thread in the Arab world. Some more than 12 million people in Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and even Iran are losing access to water, food security because of rising temperature and record low rainfall, and desertification is sweeping everywhere. How can the Arab states region scale up their climate action?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We have some regions which are very sensitive to climate change, and for example, the Mediterranean region as a whole is a region that has been warming more than the global average, and we have seen also more often drought problems, and that was also the case during the past summer. And also Middle East is very sensitive to climate change, and it's very much water resource issue, and it's also a fact that once we have started seeing higher temperatures, there's also more evaporation, and in some parts of the Arab world, we have seen also population growth. So the demand of water is also growing, and we should also touch this population growth challenge, because we are going to see more victims of climate change, and the demand of water is growing, whereas the climate is changing in the opposite direction. And we have also countries in Asia, for example, China and India. They are both very sensitive to impacts of climate change. The melting of Himalayan glacier is having big impact on them. Sea level rise, many of the economically important areas, they are on the coastline. Same is true for many Arabic countries, and at the same time, many of those countries are suffering because of poor air quality. So there's a good motivation for those countries to be active in climate mitigation. And in Arabic countries, at least some of those, it's a little bit the balance between this fossil business and the impacts of climate change. But they will also suffer because of the fossil business. So that's not an easy equation to solve, because the income is coming from fossil business, and at the same time the negative impacts are very much felt there.
Thank you so much. I'm here, sir. Benno Schwinghammer with the German press agency. Just to follow up about the methane levels. If you said it already, I'm sorry, but like, how do you explain this sudden rise? And how much of the concentration in the air is human-made, and how much is biological?
That's a good question, and we don't have a very good answer for that, to be honest. So we know that this increase is very much coming from the tropical areas, where we have both these wetlands, and we have also agricultural activity, rice paddies and cattle. So and the analysis that we have so far is showing that both of those components are having an impact, and one of the natural impacts is related to this El Niño-La Niña variability, and we know that during this La Niña year, which was very much last year, that there's a tendency to have higher emissions coming from natural sources. But we don't have very good numbers showing which part was coming from man-made sources and which part was coming from natural sources.
Hello, Kurosh Ziabari, Dag Hammarskjöld Fellow and Asia Times correspondent in Iran. Of the only 4 countries of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that haven't ratified the Paris Agreement, only Iran is one of the top 10 emitters of greenhouse gases. Actually, it's the 8th country. And the report by the Climate Action Track has found that no major global economy is on the track to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. How do you believe it's possible to persuade the countries that haven't ratified the Paris Agreement to actually start being part of it? And how is it possible to ensure that the parties that have already subscribed to it comply with their commitments?
That's a good question, and actually UNEP and WMO will publish tomorrow a so-called gap report, which is demonstrating what is the gap between the pledges that the countries have made and what has happened in real terms, and it's clear that we are lagging behind, and of course we have some parts of the world where there has been more success, and especially European countries have been fairly ambitious, and they have been proceeding fairly nicely. But of course this is a global challenge, because only of the fraction of the emissions are coming from Europe. I think that it's 8% at the moment, which is coming from Europe, and Europe has been showing the way for the other countries, and we hope that would encourage also the rest of the countries to be ambitious. And there may be also more trade-related pressure to be put on those countries who haven't been successful so far. But that's where we are. And of course, as UN we don't have strong means to put sanctions or so forth on the countries. But some groupings of countries, they're considering, for example, taxing products which are made with fossil fuels.
Yes, please.
Shadi Abdel Satter, Dag Hammarskjöld Fellow, and Sharq al-Awsat newspaper. I have a question about the war in Ukraine. Does it have an impact on greenhouse gas emissions, and to what extent? And if yes, what are you doing, or what can you do to with the warring countries to tackle this problem, and how it interferes the war it interferes with your effort to tackle the climate change? Thank you.
That's a good question, and of course this war in Ukraine has triggered multiple crises outside of Europe. Of course, in Europe it has meant shortage of energy and higher fuel prices, for example. But this war has had an impact on global food production capacity, on economies in less developed countries, and also this higher inflation is felt worldwide. So it has had a negative impact, and this lack of food supply and fertilizer supply from both Russia and Ukraine has caused problems in outside of Europe, and which may be even more severe than what's happening in for example West European countries. But when it comes to emissions, the emissions from this military action, they are still fairly marginal. So that doesn't have big impacts. But what has happened to the energy supply, that may have a negative impact on the emissions during the coming couple of years when the need of energy is comforted by using, for example, more coal in European countries. But as I said earlier, in the longer run, 5 to 10 years from now, there may be positive impacts, so that we will speed up the greening of the energy and transport means.
Thank you.
Iftikhar, online, you have a question?
I have a question. Lower your kids.
No, is Iftikhar there?
It's on the.
Yes, this is Iftikhar Ali from Associated Press of Pakistan. Sir, you just said a while ago that the world has lost the game of melting of glaciers. Will countries like Pakistan, which was hit by unprecedented floods resulting from not only monsoon rains but also melting of its glaciers, continue to suffer such calamities? And are there any measures you can suggest to counter this possibility?
Yeah, of course, you have been facing very dramatic impacts of climate change during the past months, and that's what the whole world has been sympathizing, and we are very much concerned of such evolution what has been taking place in Pakistan. And as you said, the melting of glaciers in Himalayas and also in Central Asia, in the short term it means that we will have more water in the rivers, but during the coming decades we will have less water in the main rivers, which have negative impacts on agriculture, on human beings, and also industries, and in those countries where rivers are used as means of transportation. And it has been demonstrated that the changes in the Arctic have had an impact on the weather patterns in whole northern hemisphere. There's a tendency to see more often stagnant weather conditions, which means high pressure systems with heat waves and drought during the summer half of the year, which has been the case in Europe, in China, and also western part of United States this year, and at the same time the low pressure areas have been moving along the same same paths, which has been the problem in Pakistan, that you have had rainfall coming day by day, and finally it has been altogether too much. And the same happened also in Germany during the summer 2021, and also they got casualties because of that event. And these stagnant weather conditions during the winter half of the year means cold spells which can be observed at the low latitudes than before. So we have changed already the dynamics of the northern hemisphere, especially because of the strong warming of the Arctic.
And last question goes to Evelyn.
Evelyn Leopold, I think you just answered it on the impact of the Arctic. You have it mainly in the north. What about small islands? Don't they get flooded and totally washed away by the rising storm? It's not just limited to the north, is it?
Yeah, of course, we have seen this biggest warming to take place in the Arctic because of the melting of snow and ice from that region, and it has warmed to more than double the global average. But of course, the victims of climate change will be these low-lying areas worldwide. We have lots of population in China, India, Vietnam, also European cities, North American cities, South American cities. But it's going to be fairly critical for low-lying island states and also low-lying countries like Bangladesh and Netherlands, for example. And this sea level rise, it's a slow process. We have seen doubling of the sea level rise during the past 20 years. It used to be about 2 millimeters per year 20 years ago, but recently we have seen 4.5 millimeters per year, and the magnitude that we are talking about is about half meter to 1 meter per century. So this is not happening very soon, but it's a long-term threat. And together with the storm surges, we can see several meters of sea level rise, which, by the way, took place here in New York when Hurricane Sandy was hitting here. So this average sea level rise plus storm surges, that's fairly poisonous for many countries and regions already in the short-term perspective. But this long-term perspective is something like half meter to 1 meter per century sea level rise.
And with that, I'd like once more to thank our guest, Professor Petteri Taalas. Thank you very much for your presentation.